Right, so without further ado, let's dive in, shall we? I've got Mark's Gospel chapter 15 open in front of me. I'm going to read from verse 1. Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "You have said so," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of." But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man named Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. "What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Okay, so leading out of yesterday's video for Maundy Thursday, which I'm hoping you will watch in advance of this one, you'll see that last night Jesus spent most of the night being accused, having a mockery of a child with the Jewish Sanhedrin. Okay, and they give him a bit of a beating as well, don't they, if you remember? And then they hand him over to the guards, and the guards take him away and give him another beating. I'm guessing that Jesus spent most of the night being beaten up, which is very unpleasant. Perhaps they threw him in a cell at some stage in the early hours of the morning. Perhaps he got some sleep. But he's going to be in a bit of a mess now, isn't he? He's not the Jesus we remember. He's now a very beaten and bloodied Jesus. And it's only just beginning. Very early in the morning, this is the morning of Good Friday, Friday of Holy Week, the Jews hand him over. They hand him over to the Roman governor, whose name is Pontius Pilate. A very Roman sounding name, isn't it? And the reason that they do that is because they are being occupied, the nation is being occupied by the Roman authorities. So whilst the Jewish Sanhedrin, their ruling council, can accuse people of things and find them guilty of various offences, they don't have any power to sentence them to be executed. For that, they have to hand over the person to the Roman authorities, and that is what is happening here. So at daybreak, very early in the morning, they take him quietly and they bring him to the governor's place of residence, the governor's palace. People won't really know that this has happened. The crowds that have followed Jesus into Jerusalem, the crowds that have come to him whilst he's been in Jerusalem during the week, the crowds who sat listening to everything that he said in the temple courts all week, and what remarkable teaching it's been, as we've heard, all sorts of things about the kingdom of heaven, about the end times, prophecies of things that still haven't happened, even now in 2021, that Jesus speaks about. Life-changing, amazing stuff. But suddenly, unbeknownst to most people, apart from the 12 disciples who all run away, Jesus has now been arrested. He is in captivity. Everybody is going to learn about that this morning, Good Friday. But it's all been done under cover of darkness. It's all been done pretty quietly. So Jesus finds himself in Pilate's office, and Pilate interviews him. And you might wonder, how is it that we know what happened? I mean, if this is a private interview, if it's just Pilate, Jesus, and maybe a couple of guards at most, how do we know what's going on? If you read John's Gospel, you will find that John is a Roman citizen, and John is able to go to a lot of places that nobody else is. So, in actual fact, John would have probably been in on this discussion. He had a right to be there. Okay, and we presume that he therefore was. I guess other alternatives are that once this interview had taken place, somebody went to Pilate and asked him about it. was bold enough to do so. You've also got Joseph of Arimathea, who's going to crop up a little bit later on in this narrative, and it's possible that he knew the content of the discussion between Pilate and Jesus, but people know about it some way or another. Okay, don't doubt that it's true, because you think, who could possibly have been there? There's a couple of people that I've just mentioned who could have either actually been there in the background, or they could have talked to the key characters and found out about it. All right, because people would have wanted to know. John Mark, who wrote this gospel, would have definitely wanted to know what had happened. I mean, part of it is done in public. You can see that, because the early part of it happens behind closed doors, but very quickly Pilate goes out onto his balcony, or we imagine a balcony, and there the crowd has gathered because people have heard about it now. Well, Jesus, Jesus, he's been arrested. The Romans have got him. They will all head for Pilate's residence. They will all gather in that public courtyard. They will all wait to see what's happening. What's going to happen next? Is he going to get let off, or is he going to get killed? So there we go. And notice the speed with which Mark moves through this narrative. You can find it in all four Gospels, and you need to read all four Gospels if you want to know exactly what happened on Good Friday, because there's an awful lot of detail, and a lot of it is not recorded by Mark. We know the way that Mark's Gospel is written. It's written with a real sense of urgency. Everything is bang, 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 bang. Jesus did this, Jesus did that, Jesus said this, this was said. It moves along at a real pace. And here as much as anywhere else. So whilst you think, well, this is a really important aspect of it, as we reflect on Jesus' suffering and his death, Mark just keeps on moving right through it. And he only records one thing that Jesus says to Pilate. Are you the king of the Jews? Says Pilate. This is what they're telling me. You have said so, Jesus replied. He offers nothing. That's all he says. And Pilate says, well, come on, aren't you going to say anything? I mean, for goodness sake, look at all this list of stuff that they're accusing you of doing. And Pilate is no fool. You don't get to be a Roman governor if you're an idiot. Pilate is an intelligent man. He's educated. He's wise, or he's wise in the ways of government. And he can see through all of this. He can see that for whatever reason, Jesus is very popular with everybody, with the population, but he's run foul of the ruling council. Easy to see how that could happen. You can see that all of these charges are just rubbish as far as he's concerned. He's not interested in the Jewish law about what's considered to be blasphemy or whatever. He is interested in treason, though. So if somebody is being accused of causing political problems to destabilise the city or society, or to in any way threaten the Roman rule, then he is going to deal with it. He's not going to shy away from it. But the problem is Jesus is offering no defence whatsoever. And unlike the Sanhedrin, there are 71 of them, and you get to be tried, and there's a case heard. When you are being tried by the Roman governor, and either released at that point or sentenced to death, there's no jury, there's nobody else in the room. There's just the governor and you. So if you don't bring your own defence, you've had it. And Pilate can't believe that Jesus is not bringing any defence at all. It's like, do you want to die? Why are you not saying anything? It says Pilate was amazed. And we know this is one of Mark's favourite words that he uses all the time. Whenever Jesus does or says anything, people are amazed, And Pilate is amazed too. He's never met anybody who so willingly seems to want to go to his death when he's quite clearly innocent and hasn't done anything. And we know that Pilate thinks this way because he says so in verse 14. In front of the crowd. Why do you want him dead, says Pilate. What crime has he committed? I can't find anything. I see no reason to condemn an innocent man. They have that private interview. They go pretty much straight out to meet the crowd. It's like the crowd came up. Vroom, as far as Mark is concerned, it all sort of crashes in on itself. And it all happens pretty speedily, if you think about it, that Jesus has been taken at the crack of dawn to meet with Pilate. And by 9 o'clock in the morning, as we will subsequently discover, Jesus is nailed to a cross. So it isn't mucking about. You've pretty much got sort of 3 hours and the whole thing is done, and that's it. Sentence is passed. Yeah, that's what I meant. Here it is. So all that was pretty quick. And the urgency is there in Mark's narrative. Pilate speaks to Jesus. He pretty much leads him out. Do they bring Barabbas up? I mean, it's often thought that Barabbas was brought out of the prison and stood there. Is this what they do? We know that it was a custom at this time, at the Passover, for the Romans, out of, just to say, look, we're the Romans, we appear to be brutal, but, we're capable of mercy too. So on this special religious festival for you that means nothing at all to us, but, we're going to let a prisoner go, make you love us, that's what we want, So did he bring up a couple of candidates? It kind of looks that way, doesn't it? Barabbas certainly is a name in the frame. They dragged this guy out. Who's been involved in rioting and insurrection. Mark says he was imprisoned with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. Which uprising? We don't know. The fact is, there were so many local riots and uprising in those days against the Roman authorities that it's difficult to figure out with any certainty which one Barabbas was involved with, although a fairly recent one, you would have thought, wouldn't you? So I'm imagining Barabbas brought up there, not left in the prison. Somehow they've just singled him out, and Pilate thinks, well, this is a good one. I've got this guy who just doesn't seem to have any will to offer any defence, who appears to be innocent. I can let him go. I'll feel better about that. And this guy's clearly guilty. Surely I can present them with a fait accompli. And he does so. Who do you want me to release? Says Pilate. This innocent man who's had a fair beating, as you can see already, or this horrible bloke that we all know is guilty of murder, who's been in prison already. And much to his surprise, much to my surprise, and your surprise, I'm sure, is that suddenly the crowd have completely turned on Jesus. How has this happened? Yesterday, as it were, in Holy Week, they thought he was amazing. They were turning out in huge numbers every day at the temple, in the temple courts, to hear Jesus teaching. Some of the stuff he was saying, contentious, without a doubt, but he had that authority, he had that charisma, he could heal people. When he spoke, people were amazed. It changed their lives. It made them think differently. They really did see him as the Messiah, the Son of God, who'd come to set them free. Suddenly they want him dead. How has this happened? How have they all woken up that morning suddenly hating him? I mean, it says in the text quite clearly that the chief priests have stirred them up. The elders, the teachers of the law. Perhaps the common people just looked to their authorities, the Jewish authorities, with complete respect, that whatever they said, they got on with. Perhaps they were frightened of them. They were certainly frightened of the Pharisees. They needed to do the right thing because they might be treated with brutality. If the chief priest said, shout, crucify Jesus, perhaps they thought, we'd better do it then. It's a shame really, I liked him, but we'd better do it or we'll be in trouble. I don't know. We can only imagine, can't we? If you'd have been there, if you'd heard Jesus in the temple courts, and then you'd heard when you got up that morning, he's been arrested, and you went straight off to Pilate's place, and a crowd has gathered, and out comes Pilate with Jesus and this other guy, and said, I'm going to release one of them, which one do you want? I'd be very unsettled. I'd know what I wanted to shout, and yet if everybody else was shouting different, we kind of go with it, don't we? Sometimes we go with the mob. Even if we don't understand why they're all so angry, why they're all causing so much trouble, why they're shouting and screaming and wanting something go a particular way, we don't always understand it. Sometimes we have our own agenda. Sometimes we're just there and joining in. Yeah? People can be like sheep, can they not? Get behind a cause, however ridiculous the cause might be. Make stupid, ill-informed decisions just on the basis of an awful lot of people being gathered in one place who appear to be of the same mind. And they're of the same mind because the officials amongst them, the people who are meant to be in authority over them, saying, you need to shout for Jesus to die. That is your duty. That's your civic duty here today. It's your religious duty before God. And we thought, okay. So that's what happens. Barabbas is released. Jesus is taken away. And it just goes right past this little detail. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. You know, don't you, what a Roman flogging was like? This was the precursor. This was the starter and the banquet of death that was crucifixion. This was what happened to you before you got anywhere near a cross. If you'd been convicted, if you'd been found guilty, if you'd been sentenced to death by the Roman governor and it just needed his word to do it, You were taken and you were flogged. You were lashed to a post, and then they got the whip out, and the whip was not a single whip, okay? It had many strands of leather, and as if it wasn't been bad enough being hit by a many-stranded leather whip, it had bits of bone and sort of bits of stone and sharp things sort of sewn into the leather near the tips. So when you got whacked with it, it literally tore the skin from your back. It was a horrendous punishment. And there was no limit on the amount of lashes that would be given. The Romans would lash you as many times as they felt like it. The guy who was doing the lashing would stop when his arms started to ache, basically. A lot of people who were sentenced to be crucified never made it to the cross. They died during the flogging. It would be awful. There'd be blood everywhere. There'd be appalling pain. And many people died. Jesus clearly survives it. We're given none of the detail because nobody here, Mark or anybody he spoke to, witnessed the flogging, but they all knew the significance of the flogging, and they all saw what Jesus looked like when he came out from that flogging, ready to be crucified. So let's read on from verse 16. The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is, the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. It's nothing anybody can do now. The Jewish authorities are finished. They're right, lads, job done. Romans have got him. Who knew that it was going to work out like this? We thought we were planning, weren't we, to have him just quietly arrested. And we let the Passover go by, everybody go home. And then we just grab him and just quietly get him put to death. Yeah. But as it turns out, Judas comes along and says, okay, I can give him to you now. So we got him, and well done, everybody. You've managed to make those accusations stick, and Pilate has, not managed to let him go because the force of the crowd. Well done, fellas, for getting involved in that and making them shout the right thing. We can relax. Anybody going to turn out to see him crucified? Yeah, I reckon we might as well. The Romans have got him. He's already been flogged. And then they take him into the praetorium. It says palace, that is the praetorium. In other words, the palace, it's quite a posh, but it's a military barracks, basically, in a city. So it's posher than your average Roman barracks. But that's where they are. All the soldiers are there. And they're just biding time. What time's this fella being crucified? Oh, right, we can have a bit of fun with him then, can't we? What's left of him? Anybody got anything purple? It's kind of like schoolboy bullying. You know how cruel children can be, where they sort of pick on somebody and they just say horrible things to them and have a laugh about it. And if it gets physical, which it sometimes does, you punch them, kick them, knock them over, and you laugh at them. You laugh at them when they suffer. It's horrible. People can be horrible. Children do this sort of thing. The Romans were one of the most amazing civilizations of the ancient world, weren't they? But they were brutal. And their soldiers were brutal. You don't get to have a kingdom that stretches right from the Holy Land right to Britain, do you? Without being brutal. If anybody gave you any hassle at all, you just stamped all over them. That's how you get to have a big empire. That's how you get to be in control. Fear, domination, power, death. You kill anybody who opposes you, all right? The Roman soldiers were the agents of this. They were very well equipped, they were mechanized, and they were brutal. And in their spare time, therefore, they just think, well, here's an opportunity to have a bit of a laugh. Smack somebody around a bit. Anybody got anything purple? He reckons he's a king. Yeah, I've got something purple. Right, put it on. What's the significance of purple? Purple was the colour of royalty. So they put this bit of purple cloth on Jesus and sort of just mock him, really, And they said, what can we use for a crown? Of some thorns. Jab it on his head. It would have only done superficial damage, but it would have made him bleed a lot down his face. So it would look more dramatic, and to them it would look quite amusing. Here he is, a king. Look at his crown. Look at his robe. And then they just keep whacking him, hitting him on the head with a stick. Every time they hit him and he falls down, they would laugh at him. Whoa, nice one, George. Yeah, you really hurt him there, didn't you? And they spit on him, you know, which I'm sure that the people who were ruling over them, sometimes they would long to spit in their eye as well, but they don't get the opportunity. Here's somebody who claimed to be a king. Oh, we can spit on him. How fantastic. Let's get down on our knees there. Oh, you're great, your highness. Oh, how fantastic. Everybody's laughing at a man who's just been flogged to within an inch of his life, who's possibly barely conscious, who's in absolute agony, and yet is holding out no opposition where he's probably not capable of it anymore. And when they've finished having a laugh, they took off the purple robe. Don't know if they left the crown of thorns on or not. They put his own clothes back on him, and they lead him out. So they lead him out from the barracks, they lead him through the city, they lead him to the city gate and out beyond the city, which is where he's going to die. Let's read on. Verse 21. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered him wine and mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right, one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you, who were going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. So here we are, your actual crucifixion. It doesn't take long, does it? In Mark's Gospel, there's the urgency, the narrative moving all of the time, not letting us rest. Just bang, bang, bang. This is what happened. And as we've seen, it happens in a very short space of time. 9 o'clock in the morning, Jesus is on the cross. Yeah, it all happened pretty quick. Here's this chap, Simon. The only mention of him, he's from Cyrene. We're told that he's the father of Alexander and Rufus. It's the only mention in any of the Gospels of these 2 characters, Alexander and Rufus. We don't know who they are. But it's quite clear Mark mentions them because the people who are reading this Gospel, so followers of Jesus, would know exactly who they were. You know, Alexander and Rufus. You know their dad, Simon. Yeah, he was the chap who had to carry the cross. Okay, so yeah, followers of Jesus. Simon, no doubt then, a godly man. The young men who are his kids have been following Jesus. He's just decided to make the journey to Jerusalem for the Passover. Well, actually, he's a day after the Passover, isn't he? So he's come for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But now's a good day to get in. He gets into the city before nightfall. He can start the Sabbath. But as he's arriving, something terrible happens. Yeah, he never foresaw this happening. As he's coming into the gates, there's a great crowd of people coming out of the gates. And a Roman soldier grabs him and says, "Oi, you, I've got a job for you, do it." And that's what the Romans did. Jesus once gave us some teaching, didn't he? He says, if one of the occupying forces makes you carry their pack for a mile, carry it for 2 miles. He said, go the extra mile. That's where the expression comes from. So it was obviously fairly commonplace for Roman soldiers just randomly grab people and make them do things, whether they wanted to or not. Yeah, under pain of beating, I imagine. And so they just grab this poor fellow Simon who's on his way into the city and say, right, you, carry this. And what they make him carry is this enormous beam of wood. It's the crossbar that's going to be on the cross. It would weigh 30 to 40 pounds, I'm guessing. Great lump of wood. Jesus is quite clearly incapable of carrying it. Now, Jesus is a man in his early 30s. Under normal circumstances, he could carry that. But it just goes to show just how damaged he's been by the several beatings that he's had and by that awful flogging that he's just endured within the last couple of hours or so. Okay? The man can barely stand. It's possible that he can't stand at all. It's possible that he's been dragged out of the city by soldiers. It doesn't say so. So I'm guessing he's walking under his own steam. But there's no way he can carry the crossbar of that cross, so they just get somebody else to do it. And the minute they get to the crucifixion site, right, thanks, cheers, off you go. Easy as that. They bring Jesus to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. I'm guessing, therefore, this was the place where they used to do the crucifixions, a place where there'd be a number of shallow graves or mass graves of people who'd been crucified. Remember, there are 3 people being crucified on this single day. It was a daily occurrence then, wasn't it? I imagine mass graves, shallow graves, or bodies just dumped, rotting in the sunshine. The place of the skull, because there were so many skulls lying around there. I'm guessing. There's no way they were going to execute Jesus within the walls of the city, particularly Jerusalem, yeah, and particularly not at this time when it's meant to be a significant religious festival. No, crucifixion was not a Jewish thing. That's not how they killed their prisoners. They stoned people to death. That's what the Jews did, okay? That's not very nice either, is it? Romans invented crucifixion. I don't know who invented it. Somebody with a real evil sort of heart about them sat down and said, what's the most awful, painful, lingering death that we could possibly inflict on the scum of our society? Oh yeah, crucifixion. That could take several days for somebody to die in absolute abject agony, and so crucifixion is born. And that's the way the Romans were going to deal with Jesus. After all, he was being accused of treason, which is a real big capital offence, so they're going to give him the sort of execution that a murderer would face. Yeah, or an insurrectionist. Yeah, that's why Jesus was crucified. Of course, he doesn't deserve it. He hasn't done anything wrong, has he? So they bring him out. There's a massive crowd following him. By now, I'm guessing all the people have gathered who would have been expecting to listen to Jesus teaching at the temple that day. I thought, wow, they have arrested him. Oh my goodness, they've convicted him. Yeah. Was I really in that crowd? Why didn't I stick up for him? Okay, they all follow out, and the teachers of the law, the members of the Sanhedrin, the members of the council, they are just on holiday. Yeah, their end has been achieved. They're going to sort of come along for the ride and witness this guy. They've been plotting against him for 3 years. He's been a major headache for the last 3 years of their life. Looked like he was going to take over the city, but they've got him right at the last minute, and they're going to go out and gloat, because that's what people are like. People can be evil, can't they? We can be lovely, we can be peaceful, we can seek justice, and we can be horrible, really horrible. It's all there in our human nature. It's why we need Jesus so much, my friends. Keep us on the straight and narrow. Stop us turning into animals. Stop us turning into a mob mentality where the loudest voices get the result. They bring him out, they offer him wine mixed with myrrh. What's that all about? Well, if you mix wine with myrrh, then that will be some sort of like pain relief, like some sort of anaesthetic. That's why they give it to them. Take some of this, mate, won't hurt so much. Jesus refuses it, which is crazy. You want to suffer, Jesus? You want to experience the maximum pain? What are you thinking? It's almost like you're on a mission here. He is on a mission. He's not going to withhold from himself any aspect of the human suffering that he wants to, needs to, has decided to experience as part of declaring you and me innocent and restoring our connection to God. So he doesn't take it. And then so briefly in verse 24, it just simply says, and they crucified him. They laid him on his back, they nailed him to the crossbar, they attached the crossbar to the main upright of the cross, they put the cross up on end, it fell into a hole. All of Jesus' weight went down onto the nails. The nails were driven between the bones in his wrists, yeah, not in his hands. If they put them in his hands, there's no bone there to hold them in. He'd have just fallen off the cross when it went upright. No, between his wrists. They would have hammered a nail into his feet, into his heels in actual fact, to the bar as well. When the cross went upright and it fell, all of Jesus' weight would have gone onto his wrists. It would have been absolutely agonising. His body would have pitched forward. And then from that point on, he would have been fighting for every breath, struggling upwards to get a breath, with all the agony that would cause him, and then slumping down again. How long can you keep that up for before you die? A lot of people died of asphyxiation on the cross. They died because their hearts just gave up, trying to pump the blood around their body. They would often die over 2 or 3 days. They would gradually lose consciousness. The pain would be just too much. They would be out in the hot sunshine by day and the freezing cold by night. That's how they would die. They crucified him. Before they put him on the cross, the Roman soldiers had taken his clothes off again. Interesting. Jesus usually portrayed in art on the cross wearing nothing but a loincloth. In actual fact, he wouldn't have had a loincloth on either. He would have been completely naked. That's how you deal with people when you crucify them. You humiliate them as well as kill them. The Son of God. Jesus was there at the dawn of creation, putting the stars in the sky with God the Father. And at that point, right at the very dawn of time, because God set the clock ticking, Jesus knew that at a certain point in history, he would hang naked on a cross, suffering mortal agony. And he would do it willingly, because he wanted to set us free and restore us to God the Father, because we'd lost our grip on him. We'd lost our way. It's impressive, isn't it? The soldiers take the clothes and they try and decide, they throw dice, whatever they do, who's having what. We know that Jesus was wearing a one-piece inner garment and they didn't want to tear it, so somebody got that as it was. He would have had an outer garment, so somebody might have got that, or they might have just torn it up and shared it out. He would have had a pair of sandals. They would have given them to somebody, I guess. Not much else to him, really. He wouldn't have had a lot. And it was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. There was a written notice of the charge against him, which was brought out, and a sign is nailed to the cross. We hear more detail in the other Gospels, but it says, the King of the Jews. Yeah, so this is what he claimed to be. This is the reason why he's hanging on this cross, because he claimed to be the king. Simple as that. There are 2 other guys, one either side of him, who were being crucified. It says that they heaped insults on him as they were dying in their bitterness, raging against everything, against life, against the inhumanity and the injustice of it all. They're having a go at the innocent bloke in the middle. What are you doing here? You reckoned you were the king. You reckoned you were going to sort everything out. Sort us all out then. Come on, you can't do it. You can't do it, can you? You were lying. You're as bad as everybody else, is what they would have been saying. You've got people passing by. All these people passing by. They wouldn't have come out of the city that day. They'd have stayed in the city. They've come out to have a look at Jesus. The one who said he was so great. The one who rode in on a donkey claiming to be the Messiah. Look at you now. You can do nothing about it, can you? You can't come down. You can't save yourself. They're hanging on to this thing. This line that seems to have got into the popular psyche of that day. The thing that they're hanging on to is he had said he was going to destroy the temple and build it again in 3 days. That's what they've got hold of. Yeah. And of course he didn't mean the temple in Jerusalem. He meant his body, the temple. We're told in scripture that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, the place that God lives. Jesus' body was the place where the Holy Spirit was living throughout the 33 years of his life. He was going to destroy that body by not resisting crucifixion, by not resisting pain. And as we know, because we know the whole story, on the 3rd day, he would rebuild it again by the power of God. The chief priests, the teachers of the law, of course they're making most of the noise, mocking him among themselves. Look, he was lying all along. We're justified in what we've done, fellas. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, he's neither of those things. If he was, he could come down now. But he can't, can he? We can clearly see that. We've done the right thing, lads. Don't feel bad about it. Don't feel remorse. Yeah? We've done the right thing. None of the disciples are here. They all ran away last night, didn't they, when Jesus was arrested? They have disappeared. Even Peter, who's feeling really sorry for himself, as we know, disappeared. They're not around to witness Jesus on the cross, to witness Jesus dying. With the exception of John. Doesn't say so here. You read John's Gospel, you see that John was there. Okay? There may have been a few others. There were other people there, as we will learn again in a moment. Let's do the next bit, though. I'm reading from verse 33. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing near heard this, they said, listen, he's calling Elijah. Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down, he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger and of Joseph, and Salome. In Galilee these women had followed him and cared for his needs. Many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem were also there. This is an interesting little bit of scripture, isn't it? At noon. So Jesus has been on the cross for 3 hours, as we heard earlier. You could survive 2 or 3 days on a cross before you eventually sank into unconsciousness and died. At noon, darkness comes over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. There is essentially a total eclipse of the sun. Yeah, there really is. Isn't it remarkable that that should happen right then? It's not remarkable at all. This is God who has done this thing, and he's done it on purpose. Imagine, I would like you to imagine for a moment that you are the centurion, okay? You're a Roman soldier in charge of 100 men. You have been sent just on your own. All the other soldiers cleared off now. You are the one remaining soldier. You're an important soldier, though, because this is an important execution, and we don't want any trouble. A centurion is standing there with his spear, and he's witnessing all of this. He's watching a man die in great pain on a cross. He's used to that. Doesn't affect him at all. He's not bothered at all. But when in the middle of the day, everything goes dark, now that's unusual. That's going to affect you. You're standing there in your armour with your spear going, what the hell is happening here? This man on the cross claimed to be the King of the Jews. Not just that, maybe you've heard, because as a centurion, you're an intelligent man. You're not the common herd. You're not the real brutal squaddies. You've a bit more about you when you're a centurion. You've maybe heard that this man claimed to be the Son of God, to bring deliverance to his people. What happens if you try and kill a god? He was used to the idea of gods, wasn't he? They were pagans, the Romans, but they had their gods. And they knew that if you did something to enrage a god, you were bringing trouble on yourself. If this Jesus was a god, which is what people were saying, then it's suddenly gone dark. Well, that's got to mean something, hasn't it? It's going to mean that we've angered this God. What's going to happen next? He is watching carefully to see what happens. Jesus cries out at 3 in the afternoon, so as the darkness is starting to lift, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me? Why does he shout that? God, where have you gone? Jesus has known the presence of God, his Father, with him all of the time. He spent hours and hours and hours and hours praying, as we should too, as part of our daily lives. God has spoken to him. God has transfigured him on the mountain and given him his heavenly appearance. But suddenly God has gone. For the first time in Jesus' life on earth, God has disappeared, and he knows that he's gone. Why have you gone? Where have you gone? He knows the answer, but he shouts it anyway. If the person that you loved and relied on the most has suddenly walked out and cleared off, how would you feel? You'd feel bereft, and that's how Jesus feels. But there's more to it than this. Remember how Jesus was always quoting the Old Testament in all of his teaching, just to show that this just wasn't coming from him, but it was coming from God, and it had been in place for hundreds of years. There was nothing new. He'd just simply come to do what he always said he was going to do. If you read Psalm 22, my friends, there's something for you to do as part of your Good Friday devotions. Psalm 22 vividly describes the experience of being crucified. Yes, it does. Hundreds of years before crucifixion was actually invented. Hundreds of years before anyone was crucified, and it wasn't a Jewish thing, remember, it was a Roman thing. David wrote a psalm expressing how Jesus felt on the cross in some detail. Jesus is quoting the very first verse of this. my God, why have you forsaken me? Even in mortal agony, Jesus knows his scriptures. It was written about him. He's quoting it back so that we might have it and own it and know it. Everybody who's standing by, they don't know what the heck's going on, do they? All the teachers of the law, all the normal people who walk by, they've just assumed that Jesus is getting his comeuppance. They don't realise that he's fulfilling his own testimony by tearing down his temple and then rebuilding it again. When they notice the darkness and they hear the voice, they don't even think of its significance in Scripture. Don't know why they know their Scriptures, the Jewish people do. Someone heard this and they've, right, he's calling Elijah. They know who Elijah is. Elijah is the one who's meant to come back before the Messiah. Maybe Elijah will come, because famously, if you know your Scriptures in the Old Testament, Elijah doesn't actually die. He's one of the very few people in Scripture who doesn't die. He gets taken up to heaven. Eli's another, as it goes. So they're expecting Elijah to come back at some point, because he went, so he can come back, can't he? He didn't die, so that means he could come back any time. Somebody runs, fills a sponge with wine vinegar. That sounds deeply unpleasant, but it wasn't as unpleasant as it sounds. It was wine. It would just taste a bit rank, okay? It was the stuff that the poor people drank, the only thing that would have been on hand. They fetch him something. You know, it's got a bit of alcohol in it, and it's hydration of some kind. They stick it on a stick, hold the stick up to him. Go on, suck on that, Jesus. Get some moisture into you, something. Offered it to Jesus. Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes. And then Jesus does something really actually quite unusual. He dies. He's only been on the cross now for, 6 hours, yeah? And he dies. It's very quick, very quick. It would have lasted longer than that. And he doesn't die in the normal way, the way that I've already mentioned, that, that the unending pain would either gradually... your struggle to breathe would asphyxiate you over a long period of time, or you would lapse into unconsciousness because of the pain and the struggle. It would just wear you out. You'd lose your stamina. You'd go unconscious, and you'd hang unconscious for ages, for hours and hours. Not so Jesus. Jesus, like he's suddenly been stabbed, like God has kind of come down and stuck a sword in his heart to bring it to an end, gives a loud cry, and he's dead. He's dead at that point. Very unusual. What it says to me is that Jesus, in those hours, during that period of darkness, evil draws close in the darkness, doesn't it? We associate the darkness with containing evil. It must have been really odd as everything went dark. It would be a very sinister atmosphere. And in this, the tangible weight of the evil of mankind descends on this man hanging on a cross. And at the end of his suffering, he shrieks out as all that pain is released from humanity, and he takes it all on himself. And that's why God deserts him, because for that short time when that darkness descends, God, who is love by definition, God who is light, in whom is no darkness at all, cannot remain in a place where there is a darkness of sin. He is God. He withdraws. He leaves Jesus with that full burden of sin. He leaves him alone. And then Jesus dies with it, like a sword through the heart, a sword of anguish for everything that you and I have ever done that we know to be wrong, and the stuff we don't know to be wrong, but we've done it anyway. For all the sins of humanity, Jesus' heart is pierced and he breathes his last. The victory is won. Read the other Gospels to see that in total, Jesus in total says 7 things hanging from the cross. Mark records 1 of them. My God, why have you forsaken me? By the way, if you're wondering, he says it in Aramaic, which is the language that he would have spoken. As Jesus breathes his last, the curtain in the temple was torn in 2 from top to bottom. They wouldn't have known it at the time, they would have found it later on, but not too much later on. What does that mean? It has huge symbolic significance. The curtain in the temple was the bit that covered the Holy of Holies, right in the centre. No one but the chief priest was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies, except for once a year to offer sacrifice. The Holy of Holies was where God lived, and you couldn't go there. You can't approach God Not in the Old Testament thinking. God is up on Mount Sinai at the time of the Exodus. You can't go up the mountain to meet with God. Only Moses, only his chosen person. The high priest was the chosen person for that year. He could only go into the Holy of Holies once a year on his own. They used to tie a rope round his waist, this is true, so that if he went into the Holy of Holies and he fainted or he was ill and collapsed, they could drag him out without having to go in and get him, because you weren't allowed. And yet here suddenly the curtain is torn. Nobody's done this. This is done by the power of the death of Jesus. It's torn from top to bottom. The next time they go that far into the temple, they see that the curtain has torn. And what this means is that Jesus kicked in the door to heaven. You couldn't approach God. We'd lost our grip on God through our sin. Jesus has kicked in the door. Jesus has torn the curtain so that we can go straight in. There'll be no distinction from now on, says Jesus. We can all be with God, and God can be with us. Which is why if you're a Christian right here today, Good Friday 2021, you will know that God is with you in your home as you are watching this, or wherever you happen to be. You will know that you can talk to God at any time, and he is right there with you, listening to you, through the presence of Jesus in your life. Yeah? God is not distant. God is not unknown. You can know the character, the personality of God. You can know his love. You can know it. You can experience it now. By walking as a Christian, you become a friend of God through Jesus. Through reading this gospel and the detail that we have, you become a friend of Jesus, and you understand him and you know him like your best mate, the best mate you've ever had. That's how familiar you are. You aren't frightened of upsetting him or disrespecting him because he's your friend. And look what he's done for you. He's wanted your friendship so badly that he's prepared to go through all of this for you, just to win you as a friend, and to say that at whatever point that you leave this world or I leave this world, we just walk straight through an open door into heaven, and God goes, ah, there you are, Ralph. Come here. That's what Jesus has done. That's what it means. That was the symbolism of the curtain being torn. And we're back to this centurion that I mentioned a few minutes ago. He's still standing there with his spear next to the cross. He's seen all the lights go out all around him. He's thought, this is unusual. This, I can sense the evil here. There's bad stuff. There is evil. I feel it. I feel it in the air. And there's that man suffering on the cross. And he's shouting out, where have you gone, God? Well, if there's a God, he certainly isn't here now. I feel this evil, the centurion is thinking. And then the light lifts and there's this massive scream. What? No one screams like that on a cross. He's dead. He's actually dead. How's he died so quickly? How's he died like that? It's like someone has stuck a sword in him. I didn't stick my spear in him, although interestingly enough, and it's not recorded here, but in other Gospels, the centurion does stick his spear into Jesus' side to check that he has actually died, because he can't have died this quickly. The implication of Good Friday was that the Sabbath was coming. That the Jewish Sabbath is on a Saturday, all right, not a Sunday. And the Sabbath would begin at sunset. If there were any bodies on crosses that the Romans had executed, they had to be taken off the crosses by sunset, because it would have been offensive to the Jews to have dead bodies hanging around as the Sabbath began. There's something in the Jewish law about it. Because a hanging body was considered to be a curse. So if those three guys, Jesus and the other two, if any of them hadn't have been dead by sunset, the soldiers would have come along and just broken their legs, smashed their legs with hammers or something, or their spear, so that all their weight went onto their wrists and they would die immediately. They wouldn't be able to breathe. That would be it. Finish. Break their legs. That would suffocate. Okay. Didn't have to do it with Jesus. Didn't have to break his legs because he'd already died. Quite dramatically. So, now the centurion sees all of this and he recognises that he's seen a lot of people die, and this has not been normal. This has not been a conventional death. And all the things, that sense of evil around, and then that sense of the evil lifting, and Jesus dying so dramatically, like God has put him out of his misery. He says, surely this man actually was the Son of God. For a pagan to say that, he'd had a really profound spiritual experience, hadn't he? Verse 40. And Mark finally introduces some women into his gospel. He hasn't done all the way through. What can I tell you? The other gospels do. They're a lot better at it. John Mark, patriarchal society, what can I tell you, hasn't featured any women. This is the first mention of a key gospel character, Mary Magdalene. She's all over the place in all the gospels. We know a lot about her, but this is her first mention at the death of Jesus. There's another Mary, the mother of James the younger. Remember, there were two disciples called James. So the younger one of those, James, this is his mum. And he has a brother called Joseph, who is not a disciple, okay? She's there too. And there's a woman called Salome. And if you look in the other Gospels, we can get a bit more info about Salome. Salome is the wife of Zebedee. Salome is the mother of James and John. That's James the elder, James and John, the two fishermen. Remember? Peter, James and John, the inner sort of circle of friends, the three. James and John, their mum, Salome. The women have not deserted Jesus. That's important, isn't it? All the fellas who pledged allegiance to him and thought they were so great and thought they deserved positions of honour, particularly James and John, they've all cleared off. Apart from John, who's still there, all right? But so John is stood there with his mum, basically, yeah, Salome, Mary the mother of James the younger, and Mary Magdalene. Those three women are recorded by name and standing there, but it says that there were lots of other women as well. Many other women who'd come up with him to Jerusalem were there. So we're told that those three women who are named, they early on had started following Jesus, the same as the disciples had done, and they had cared for him on a practical basis as well as a spiritual basis, yeah, which is great, which is awesome to know. And they never get the recognition except for here. They're every bit as much disciples in the apostolic sense as any of the rest of the 12, but they're just not named, and it's terrible. But here they are at last, and we are told that they have been there all the time. They've always been there. They've missed nothing. They've travelled. They came down along with many other women. Never believe that Jesus, as he went around with these people that he travelled with, that they were all fellas. They were not. They were mixed gender. There were loads of women. Women play a real key part. Who is the person who has the honour of being the first person to see the risen Jesus on Easter Sunday? Mary Magdalene. Not a man. Not Peter. Not John. No one like that. Mary. It tells us a lot about our attitude, what our attitude should be towards gender in 2021, to see what Jesus' attitude towards gender was right throughout history, from the earliest times, and definitely during his earthly incarnation. Let's continue. I'm in verse 42. It was preparation day, that is, the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in the linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. Jesus is dead. Sunset is coming. It's preparation day, the day before the Sabbath. Got to get those bodies off the cross. Joseph of Arimathea, first mention of him. He's a member of the council. Prominent member of the council. Senior. He's part of the Sanhedrin. He was there at Jesus' trial. He wasn't joining in, was he? Because secretly, though he didn't dare declare it, though he didn't join in with all the accusations, he knew Jesus was innocent, and he knew Jesus was the Messiah. He knows Jesus is the Son of God. He's not with the rest of them, but he daren't speak out. He's just kind of quietly going along just to see what he could possibly do. And as he's watching Jesus die, because he's there, but he's not joining in obviously with the insults with the rest of them, he's thinking, I need to do something for this guy. When he's dead, I need to do something. There's that tomb. I've had it ready for years. He's a rich man. I've had it ready for years for myself. Well, somebody needs it more than I do right now. So this tomb that it spoke of, it's Joseph's tomb. We're told as much in other Gospels. And he goes straight to Pilate. He's not going to mess about with the Sanhedrin. He goes straight to Pilate. There's a man to see you, Joseph. He's from Arimathea, I believe. All right, Pilate's probably never met him before. Yes, what is it? What do you want? Can I have Jesus' body? I know this is a strange thing to ask as an individual. I know you wouldn't normally give people's bodies to anybody to dispose of, but would you mind if I had it? And Pilate's go, he's already dead. He's only been up a few hours. I thought he was going to be there, you know. So he doesn't trust Joseph, notice. Doesn't trust anybody who's Jewish. Instead, he sends for that centurion. Brings him to him. You know, you were standing at the cross. Is it true that this Jesus bloke has died? Yeah, says the centurion. And if I had the opportunity to tell you, I've never seen anything like it. I don't think he got to say that. But yeah, he's dead. Okay, well, all right then, says Pilate, who by this stage doesn't care any more than anybody else what happens to a dead body. Yeah, take him then if you want him. Don't know what you want him for. Take him. Do what you like. Bury him if you really want to. Joseph takes him. Joseph buys some cloth. He does it properly. He wraps the body. He takes it down from the cross. He gets a lot of help. In classical art, often we see the women are there at the cross, taking Jesus down from the cross. There are many tears. Remember that another Mary, Jesus' mum, is there at the cross, not recorded by Mark, but she was definitely there at the cross as well. Nobody should see that. Their own son being crucified and then having to take his body down. But the women, along with Joseph, take Jesus' body to this tomb that Joseph had prepared in advance for himself. They put the body into the tomb. They wrap it up. They haven't got the opportunity, because time is short. The Sabbath is starting. They haven't got time to anoint the body as they normally would, as is their practice. They decide, we'll come back tomorrow and do that. Yeah, we'll leave as soon as we on Sunday rather. Wait till the Sabbath is over. So wait for the Sabbath to go by. We'll come back on Sunday morning. We'll anoint the body, as we should do. It's only right to do. But for now, this is the best we can manage. It's done hurriedly. So Joseph rolls a stone in front of the tomb to stop basically wild animals getting in, but also to stop anybody coming and nicking the body as well. There's an element of that. He would have needed a lot of help, wouldn't he? Wouldn't have done it on his own, to roll a big stone in front of a tomb so that nobody could gain entry. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Joseph, they were both there. They know where the tomb is. It's not just them. Many of them do. And so we end Good Friday. It's hard to stop now, isn't it? I said I was going to go to the end of chapter 15 and finish. It's only Good Friday. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. And all the hope of humanity is reignited 2 days from today as the tomb is found empty. You know the rest of the story. And you can carry on and read it. You know what happens. But just let me give you a little bit of editorial about chapter 16 of Mark's Gospel, because we are now there. It describes the resurrection. It describes many of the features of the resurrection that we know from reading in other Gospels as well. There are angels and stuff. And crucially, the angels remind the women that Jesus had said that he would go before them back to Galilee. So that's where the disciples are to go. Go and tell the disciples, go back to Galilee. He'll meet you there, where you came from. Don't hang around in Jerusalem. Go back to Galilee. And then it's just left after 8 verses. And they're just afraid and confused and they don't know what to say. They just run away. And you think, what sort of way is that? To end such a long story, such an accurate narrative, such detail of the life of Jesus. How can it possibly end there? I'll tell you what they think, what most people think has happened. Mark's Gospel, remember, was written 2,000 years ago, the better part of 2,000 years ago. And copies would have been made, and copies of copies would have been made, but fairly early on, in the first copy or the first few copies, they think the end of Mark's Gospel has been lost, or somebody has nicked it. If you were one of the Jewish authorities who were trying to make out that Jesus' story ended with his death, you would want to get your hands on a copy of Mark's Gospel, which is the earliest Gospel we believe to have been produced. You want to get your hands on it and tear the last couple of pages out, wouldn't you? The ones that talked about him coming back to life and actually fulfilling the prophecies and setting everybody free and bringing salvation to the entire humanity. You'd want that wiping from history, would you not? And people believe that that is what has happened. They haven't managed to get all of the resurrection story off the end of Mark's Gospel, but they've got some of it. The what happened next bits, the bits where he crucially starts appearing, the bits where he actually returns. So somebody has got hold of a manuscript of Mark's Gospel and they've put a bit of editorial on the end of it. And you can find that from verse 9 onwards. In my Bible, there is a big line drawn underneath verse 8, and then it says, this bit has been added. Okay, and it's in my Bible, it's in italics, just to go on to show that Mark didn't necessarily write this. In fact, it's highly unlikely that Mark wrote it. It's not in the same literary style, and it mentions things that feature nowhere else in Mark's Gospel. Okay, but it kind of rounds up the rest of the story using material from the other three Gospels and also all the stuff that was known to the followers of Jesus at that time. It talks about what happened next in some detail, but it's not from Mark. Okay, so if you want a much more comprehensive account of the resurrection and what happened after that, read Matthew's Gospel, read Luke's Gospel, read John's Gospel, which has definitely the most comprehensive account of Easter Sunday, the day of resurrection, because John was there. Okay, Peter was there as well. Peter's account is lost. It just makes you realise that all of this is probably true, doesn't it? If everything survived intact, if there was no jeopardy, then you'd think somebody's made this up. But the fact that bits have been removed, bits have been lost, it's been tampered with, people have done their best to suppress it, just convinces you, does it not, that it must be true. And we have everything that we need. You might say, oh no, the end of Mark's Gospel is missing. What's happened? God has ensured that we've got everything we need to believe. We have the fullness of the Easter story, the greatest story ever told. But it's not a story, it's true.